Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Lee Bolton and Jamus Wood. So these guys are partners in something called the Embodied Present System, which they founded, based on dance, contact improv, body mind centering, spiritual inquiry, a bunch of other stuff too. They've got very broad backgrounds. It's nice to have some people in Britain working who founded their own thing, doing something creatively. I was dancing with these guys recently at the Buddhafield Festival and known you both for a few years. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So what was the beginning of your journey with the body? I guess I'll ask you to be relatively brief if there's two of you, but, start one of you and then the other one go in. So what was your journey with this?
So I started off as a photographer when I could still see properly. And I ended up photographing dancers. But I very much turned this quality of a head on a stick. And as I started to explore photographing dance, I started getting drawn in and I decided I wanted a body as well as a head. So that's me.
My entry was actually a bit more around injury. I hurt myself and ended up training in massage, strangely, and was drawn into the world of body and finding more of myself on the ecstatic dance floor initially. Through expression, that was sort of my entry, expression. Then I met Jamus and found myself in the world of contact improvisation, being thrown around a little bit, and really enjoying the more physical orientation of meeting another person. The acrobatics. But then later the somatic aspect of going in more inside the body.
Okay, just to sort of place this, so you guys are at home in Bristol, is that right?
That's right.
Yep.
And before then, give us a bit of a sense of the geographical journey here.
I started in Bristol. Then I went to study in Finland. I did 2 years out in Finland, training in a little town called Outokumpu. And they have an amazing improvisational training there. And then I came back to Bristol. So that's kind of my journey. And I've also been working with Touchdown Dance for probably 10 years now. So, yeah, being around this area a lot, but a journey to Finland along the way.
I actually started in Edinburgh, dancing 5 rhythms every opportunity I could get. Interestingly, I found myself very early on a heartbeat workshop in Edinburgh, dancing and whirling about, and came across this other person who ended up being Jamus, but I didn't meet him actually until many years later when I found myself living in Bristol, and that was actually where our journey together began. So 5 rhythms dance floor and then on to contact improvisation. And I've actually been in Bristol predominantly ever since, a little bit in Frome, but this area. And a little bit of teaching in Europe, a little bit back in Australia where I come from. But southwest of England is where we're based.
Are you guys romantic partners or just business partners?
I don't know.
We're both.
We're both. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just sort of realised I'd never clarified that.
Yep.
All right.
It's a
Which is great and also has its challenges.
Yeah, do you want to speak a little bit about that? I'm not sure how many other people we've had on the show that are sort of in that position, and there's quite a few people out there, I think, who work with partners in this work. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how that is.
It has an intensity to it. There's no getting away, really. You go out and you teach, and then you come home and you're relating with the same person.
I think from the background that we're teaching, there is a level of intimacy and really, I want to say, nailing yourself to what's going on in this moment. And there is that. that's the part of the intensity of it. And there's a real big learning in it, like massive learning moment to moment, and working with the difference between two people's experience of the work and of each other and perspective. So, yeah, there's quite a lot.
I feel like there's a big piece for us is in that we have very different bodies, and what works for me may not work for Lee. And that's been really interesting around developing teaching material is like, all right, this flies for me, but actually it doesn't really touch you. And so we've had to develop a more rounded way of exercises and ways of moving that suit both bodies, and hopefully include other body types as well.
Yeah, I mean, tell us something about the development of that work then. So, I mean, interestingly, we're sort of three of the only people in the UK who have created embodiment systems. It's really rare in the UK. I mean, everyone in America trademarks their thing after 2 minutes and 2 weekend courses, But you've made the choice I did, which was to sort of create your own thing and say, right, this is a thing now.
I'd say that our work's drawn from many sources. So yeah, there's the contact improvisation source. There's body-mind centering. There's Feldenkrais. There's Helen Poyner's work. And then there's the embodied spiritual work our teacher's called Adam Bradpeace, which is bringing a lot of the developmental pieces, the more social developmental pieces into the work. So I feel like we've drawn from a really large umbrella of different practices and found what works for us and what our interests are to thread through into our form.
Yeah, it's been a real weaving, actually, because obviously because there's two of us creating and we both have our interests, and it's also meeting those who are out there. You have to find your market, and we are quite niche because we are inviting people to explore all spectrums of embodiment, and also taking it to a level of depth. But yeah, I think the real art in the weaving is inviting people to take it to the depth that they can meet in themselves. So yeah, that's a really important part around finding safety for people. So helping them to meet themselves where they are, learning as far for them to go as far and as fast as they're able to go at one moment.
But just to jump in there, I'd like listeners to have a sort of better sense of what you're actually doing. So obviously I've just been in a brief workshop with you guys, and listeners have had no experience very likely of your work. So could you and I know it's broad, but can you give people a bit of a sense of the work?
So basically, we're inviting people to bring their awareness down and into their body. So they're experiencing the body from the inside out. And once they have a sense of that, we're bringing it, keeping that sense of awareness and bringing that out into the world so they relate to the world. Generally, the work involves movement and dance. It can work with experiential anatomy or developmental movement patterns. Often take groups out into nature, so there can be a lot of moving across landscapes.
Yeah, and the reason for all of this is really an invitation to find more of yourself, to bring more of yourself into the world. So by exploring your inner landscape and unraveling and connecting, inviting awareness to different parts of your inner landscape, there's more of you to explore life. So you're finding connections and relationship. That's sort of the essence of what we're offering, finding inner connections, inner relationship, and allowing that to unfold into life, bringing more expression, more of yourself.
Yeah, we also, the dancing side of the work often is about freeing up awareness, freeing up energy, and giving time to digest the deeper work we're doing. So we're often working with awareness, with touch, with movement. And that relates very much to the first senses we have in development are the sense of touch and the sense of movement when we're in utero. And that's often our beginning place, is working with touch, working with movement.
I had a very good experience with you guys just a few days ago, and did a couple of hours in a tent, and it wasn't ideal conditions for your work. I think there was some god-awful woman shouting in another tent next door, and you managed to create like a nice boundary containment though, which I thought under the circumstances was not so easy, and people felt like they were opening up, and we did some movement work, tuning into ourselves, and then I worked with a partner, and I had a very kind of sort of intimate, sensual connection with a partner, very kind of heart opening, and they sort of said very pleasant things afterwards about the workshop as well. Kind of certainly felt like it was kind of a soft experience, a kind of animal experience in some ways, and certainly very pleasant.
Yeah, we were very much bringing an invitation to the animal body in that festival. So we did another workshop called Soft Animal, which was kind of based on a poem called Wild Geese, which is basically an invitation to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. So those two workshops really interconnected, and were basically allowing instinctual movement and then bringing the heart to that instinctual movement. And lots of dancing, lots of moving, lots of letting go, lots of finding safety and support. And then from the safety and support, finding our ways into relationship, into expression, into moving.
Yeah, I think
that sums it up quite well, doesn't it?
Yeah, that sums it up quite well.
In terms of sort of safety, then, this is a word I hear a lot, and I've only started hearing it a lot the last few years. I'm not quite sure what it means. I'm not sure if it really is a feeling or not. It seems to be a sort of modern, trendy thing to say. What do you guys mean when you talk about safety?
Actually, we talk more about support.
Okay.
And that's finding a bodily sense of where the body is supported. So we do work a lot with people lying on the ground and moving from the ground and moving close to the ground and resting on the ground and being squished into the ground. So there's this sense of compression and holding, and the body then starts to relax. It starts to stop bracing against the world.
There's something about the nervous system relaxing, which allows a lot more capacity in our ability to express who we are and actually be at ease in what we're doing. So, yeah, for me, the sense of feeling supported or feeling okay in something that we're offering is allowing someone's nervous system to really find a resting place. So it also comes in the environment of safety, welcome. So if you're feeling at ease in the environment and okay to be with what's going on, that's a level of support as well.
And my sense is that as we bring more awareness into the body, there is just a natural softening of the nervous system, relaxing. Often the weight of the body can drop a little bit. There's not a kind of pushing away from the ground. There's more of a sense of we're in the ground a bit more. So there's a really clear yielding into support, really. Mm-hmm. Receiving the support that's around us.
And I think it's really important that safety and support is actually a feeling quality. It's not something I can say, you're coming into a safe space. You're in a safe space.
Yeah, I agree with that. This idea when people tell you you're in a safe space, I'm like, well, what does that mean? You can just tell them that. But is it really a feeling? It wasn't a feeling until 5 years ago, unless you lived in California. like it's suddenly this new feeling that people have developed. I think that's bullshit. I don't think it's a feeling. I mean, there's a lack of anxiety,
I think there's a lack of bracing.
So there's a physicality to that too, right? Like a lack of fight-flight response, of bracing or tensing up, or
there's more space. Very simply, there's more space, and there's less fighting against the world.
So it's getting a bit more concrete for me when people talk about space, or they talk about fight, flight, or bracing. It starts to sort of make more sense to me.
Yeah.
And there's also an availability, I think, that comes when people feel a bit more supported.
Like in terms of availability for relationship, or
Yeah. And actually, a curiosity and an interest often wakes up. It's like, all right, what's here? Who's here?
I think also there's an acknowledgement of our own capacity to, and that we can only go as fast as we can go, and that's going to be different for each person.
Yeah.
There's a sense of being closer to our own experience, and a little bit more. So there's an empoweredness in that, like not perhaps like this sort of, I'm going to go as fast as that person because they know what they're doing. There's something of that in there.
Yeah, I'm seeing more of people sort of honouring they go at different paces. Sometimes this can be almost absurd. There was one person in the workshop that I was with you guys who kind of was sitting to the side and was not willing to do the sort of quite a sort of basic gentle touch exercise. And on the one hand, I sort of respected the fact that they'd done that and said, you know what, this is my choice and I have a right not to do something, and that's fine. And on the other hand, I sort of thought, well, is there sort of any basic kind of adult robustness there?
Possibly not.
But are they in the right place, being in a sort of personal growth workshop at a festival at that point? This isn't like a one-to-one therapy session.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. On our retreats, we do expect people to be involved and to participate.
I think there are definitely edges. As you said at the beginning of this, that we're in a festival. It's not ideal situation, and I tend to be okay with people just making choices around that, because festival, you have to step back out into sort of a crazy environment, and you don't know what they've been to in the session before.
I think we also draw off contact improvisation that it's always possible to sit out.
Mm-hmm.
And to
I'm with you on this. I'm with you. It has to be, by agreement, and do people want to do it or not? I mean, I'm a big believer in consent and that being part of it. And I spent a lot of years sort of pushing for more consent in embodied work. And I don't think, in some ways, you can't take that too far. But there is another. I'm trying to articulate it. Excuse me for the clumsy language. There is another trend developing, which
it's a little bit over cautious, or sort of an assumption of I'm damaged and can't do sort of basic human things, which I kind of think they probably could. Do you know? I don't know, so I don't want to judge any particular individual. And any particular individual makes choices, I respect them, and maybe encourage them gently to participate at a low level if they can. But there's something in the culture that's developing around this. I'm not quite sure how to.
Are you talking like the culture around trauma?
I think the sort of normalization of trauma, as we're all traumatized and therefore we can't do basic human adult stuff.
Right.
And I wonder if as I said, I've been pushing sort of trauma education for years as a positive thing. I wish the yoga world was more trauma sensitive, to this day. And sometimes I'm seeing it's putting people in a frame of you're broken and can't do things. Whereas I'd very much like to put people in the frame of you're whole and you can do things, and maybe you need to go a bit gentler, or, take care of yourself in a slightly different way.
I think our practice is very much one orientated around wholeness, and that we're curious about pulling pieces in that have kind of been forgotten in people. And that they are, we're just creating a space where they can bring these pieces in themselves. So basically, we're very interested in empowering people to allow an organic sense of growth within themselves.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I am also curious about what you're saying, Mark. And it's it almost feels like a delicate balance or dance around what's possible and what's not. And we have said in the past when people join us for a workshop or a retreat that, and it is a big element of what we're offering, that we're in a community where there is in essence, like a group field, and we're all part of that. And so the invitation is to include yourself in some way. So you're actually exploring in some way on some level, and not becoming a bubble of isolation in a way. And I think that's important in the unfolding, because we all affect each other in a way, in this group, in the sense of group field.
We're going together.
We're going together, and actually we can help each other in that way. You learn a lot being in that group, whether you can directly dive into something or be part of from a quiet place.
There's something here around, I'm again just thinking, I regard you as peers and, you know, potential friends, and I'm sort of thinking with you out loud, and there's something here of like the trauma culture has told us to really respect our boundaries as individuals and what's okay for us and what's not. And I think we're all on board with that. And, you know, I teach people, all my students, that as a basic, you know. And but then there's another piece, which is something like consideration also for the group, without overstepping one's own safety limits or, you know, trauma stuff or people pleasing or anything like that. Also realizing that we are part of a social system.
Yeah.
I think trauma can take over, and I think it can, it's wanting to kind of recreate the situation where it was birthed. And so it's almost like if we give too much space to the trauma, we'll end up in a traumatic field. So it's, as you said, you're talking about balance. There's a sense of, there's some time for this, but that's not what we're here for.
What's more interesting? What can be more interesting here? And and I think we need to acknowledge trauma is part of what's going on sometimes. But if the emphasis, as you've just said, James, is completely on that, we lose focus of actually what's most interesting.
We're not a trauma training. We're not training about trauma. We're we're working with growing.
Yes, growth rather than healing. I think this distinction is quite important for people to know which field they're in, because I think both are super valuable, but I'm very much in the growth field, and there's certain sort of assumptions of robustness and adultness that I expect, and yes, trauma comes up, but I'm very much in the growth field. And there's other people like my mentor Paul Linden who are, you know, working with abused children. He's very much in the healing field. Of course they're not so independent, but it's a nice distinction.
It's important.
And what are you sort of trying to bring in then, like in terms of like the experiential anatomy, like body mind centering influenced, I guess you're trying to wake people up to sort of different parts of themselves, like
I feel like, you know, most of us get a fairly full repertoire by the time we're 9 months, but then we kind of forget that repertoire through our education system, through knocks of life. So it's a process of remembering movement patterns, movement capacities, ways of perceiving the world that we knew as young people, and bringing that into ourselves as adults. And I think that really can increase our capacity and our capability in the world. I mean, a lot of people talk about grounding. It's like, what is grounding? You know, and we were doing a workshop, day before, on including the gut body, you know, relating. And it was just, the room had weight. The room had a natural grounded quality without doing a grounding exercise. We just included the gut. So, and it has its own quality. It has its own transmission in the room. And when everyone does that, things just start to happen. So we're often involved in creating the right conditions for embodiment to happen.
Yeah. And the really interesting thing about this is you don't actually have to know how to do it. And that's part of the gift of being in a group, in fact, is that when you invite equality and people consider that and stand in themselves, like, you don't even have to know how to do it. The field, the group starts to take on a momentum of its own, and the quality resonates throughout. And then it is possible to actually get a felt quality in your body, like, oh, this is my gut, these are my legs, my feet feel really connected to the earth, and actually I feel sort of down, or gravity. I feel gravity.
And I have a sense that people are hungry for this. These are forgotten qualities in our bodies, in our environment, and we actually need them, particularly now in these times.
Well, I really enjoyed the heart work you guys were doing, and it can be one of those kind of cliched words, the heart. Yeah. It's used metaphorically or poetically, kind of roomy way of talking about it. And but I found it, actually tuning into the heartbeat myself, then another moving more from the chest, and then more metaphorically sort of opening up and softening in this kind of nice space of the Buddhist festival. It's just what I needed on that day, and that's a part of me that gets kind of lost when I'm doing 1,000 emails and being super cognitive in a day.
Yeah, I think that's after Buddhafield, actually we went to a different festival, a total contrast. It was more about ideas, and there were lots of super intellectual conversations going on, important conversations,
climate change,
we need to be having. And yet we offered a workshop at the end to do with orientating ourselves from three brains, the head, the heart, and the gut. And the reception of that, and just how, I'm going to use the word grounded, how people felt really in their bodies at the end of this festival that was all about talking and ideas. It was palpable in the room, and not everyone in the room had realised what they were coming to, and most of them commented at the end that it was a really helpful thing, particularly in everything that they'd been talking about that was really important. They needed to include their bodies. Yeah,
and for me, the other piece there of the Buddhafield Festival was just being out in the sort of fields and the woods for a few days and walking barefoot and sleeping on the ground. And I know you guys do a lot of stuff in nature. Like, maybe you could speak more about that, because what I found is that even if I didn't do any workshops of Buddhafield or anything, just sort of being out close to the ground and walking around the trees every day, that has, every year I go, that has a profound effect on me. And even just when I do a workshop in the countryside, it seems like the countryside's doing most of the heavy lifting.
I think what you just said last is really important, is the countryside does the heavy lifting. We use nature as a teacher. It's like we'll do a morning dance class, morning movement class, maybe with some experiential anatomy or some developmental movement in the studio. And then we take that material out into the land and let students feel where they're drawn to move. We might give them a kind of set of movements to do, or a relationship to explore. But basically, we're letting their movement and their bodies find their place in the landscape, and opening the relationship between them and the landscape. And magic can happen. And it's like, we're not doing it. It's just like, again, creating the right conditions where we're receptive as human beings to what is already around us.
Yeah, and I'm going to sort of go back to the topic earlier about safety and support, and what you were saying, Mark, about nature doing the heavy lifting. There's something innate that happens when we're in nature, that around the nervous system, that just, there's like a melting in a way, or a softening, and nothing necessarily has to be done. Quite often we'll take people out into the land, we'll give them, as Jamus said, something like a set of instructions, or what we call a score, something to play with. but also invite the possibility that they might end up going to sleep, because the body actually might need that. Our bodies go a lot slower than our minds, and we often need to catch up with ourselves, and nature is a really great place for that. Just really allows the softening and the melting of the nervous system. And different locations have different offerings. So we use a beautiful piece of land, or work with a beautiful piece of land in Wales, West Wales, and the trees have a very ancient feel about them and a quiet presence. Different times of year they offer different things. You can just sit there and feel very present with what's happening and quieten down. The mind softens. So yeah, as you say, we don't have to do too much in nature. Nature offers us a lot in relationship.
And then the work in nature, it really works with people going at their own speed, finding their own pathways. Everyone has their own individual journey out on the land, which is great, because it's like they find their place and they find their own exploration. And I really feel that nature is a very powerful mirror for people. And it's almost like they draw the pieces that they're open to and ready for from nature. It's like they're just drawn to a place and, oh, right, that has something for them. I've often been drawn to a place and go, oh, that again. Okay. So I feel that's quite interesting. Is that where are we drawn? What are we being offered in our lives right now?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Very simply, it can also invite a quality of innocence, which is really helpful in the melting and the softening, like a playful quality.
Yeah, play. I was going to say play. Yeah.
Play. Yeah.
Letting ourselves be kids again for a while.
Yeah. A lot comes out when you're a kid.
I've definitely seen different places have different impact, and I find it quite absurd now. There'll be a study that come out saying, nature is good for us and it calms us down or something like that. It's like, well, that's bloody obvious, isn't it? Really? We need to study, we need to give it a name and, do some data on it, really?
Yeah.
Kind of sad that we got to the point where people don't believe that without the data. But then there's, as you say, there's slightly more mysterious things of different places seeming to have a different, vibe, for want of a better word.
It can also wake us up, bring a bit of craziness out of us.
For sure. I mean, I definitely feel this in cities, and I think that's going to be, different city. You get off the train from London to Brighton, and it's got a different flavour. There are those sort of different flavours of the general group embodiment of a place, And in cities, there's one lot, and then in countryside, there's another lot, isn't there? And I find sometimes it's quite stark if we get on a plane and I fly 4 or 5 hours, I'm in Israel or Russia, and I've got there so quickly, it's just sort of very obvious how different the place is because I haven't had a subtle adjustment over time.
I think that's a very interesting piece is where we're rooted in different landscapes and how we relate to them, because I find in the UK that, oh yeah, this is my place. But if I go to Spain, it's like, oh, I don't know how to relate to this new environment. It's like there's something in my body that really reads the place that I've grown up in. It's like I am part of this landscape. And I find that really interesting that I can go to another country and it's like, okay, I have to start to learn how to relate to this new place. And I found that really striking New Zealand because it looked almost the same.
Right. Similar looking in some ways, but
it wasn't. And it was like, oh, I don't know how to relate to this.
Yeah.
I found that fascinating that it looked like Wales, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I find that different. Coming from Australia is vastly different, and how the country actually affects me bodily is vastly different as well. No good, bad, anything. It's just really including the difference of how a place affects us bodily.
Australia's pretty different, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, pretty different.
Too big, too hot, and too fucking poisonous. Give me.
Took me a really long time to be able to lay in the grass here without sort of everything going, ew, is there something going to bite me?
You know, I just had talked to a teacher who's working in the States, a yoga teacher, and she was like, you know, nature's your friend, nature's healthy, nature can't hurt you. And then, you know, she had everyone lay down poison ivy, you know, in the States. We just don't, people in other countries might not know this, but British countryside is very benign. There aren't really poisonous snakes or poisonous plants or bears or wolves or extremes of weather. You know, there's no earthquakes. You know, there's a sort of benignness to our relationship to nature in this country.
Yeah.
Treats us well.
Comparatively, yeah.
So why do people do your work then? Like the students you work with, like what's their main motivation?
Different reasons. We have a cross section of people working with us. We have, I mean, as an example, we have a mixture of ages from late 60s, I think, probably older, but we have a regular student who works with us, and she's just fascinated with how her body works, but also from the perspective of just wanting to keep moving. She loves expression through the body, but knowing how her body moves from a detailed place allows her to keep mobile and agile in a lot of different
one of her concerns was getting old, and she really enjoyed the movement work that takes you from the ground to standing and back again in very organic ways. It's almost like, it's very much like the Feldenkrais work in that we're inviting people to organize their bodies in a more animal way, which means that they don't get old so easily. You know, there's more movement capacity.
Yeah, and also our work has a certain level of not so much theory as we send people off to study, but we're connecting dots. So it's physical to maybe a way of seeing. You do have to think a little bit as well. It's not. It's incorporating movement and study through thinking about things as well. So yeah, it keeps her agile. That was one of her things.
We do get a few students from the ecstatic dance environment, and they're looking for something more. They're looking for a different approach, and often they're looking for a little bit more what we call body experience, more on the inside of their body. How can I actually move from expressing myself into actually feeling myself a little bit more?
Also students who are looking for an expressive awareness practice. So they may have quite a strong seated meditation practice. They like dancing, but they're sort of wanting to incorporate both. So we don't really refer to our work as a movement meditation, because meditation conjures up these ideas of very slow movement, whereas our work does include that. That's just one spectrum. I mean, you can end up being very expressive, quite punchy, in the sense that you're punched out, you're there, you're quite alive in your movement and expression. So, but there is the awareness. So there is you're becoming a witness to everything that your expression and what you're bringing into the world.
We get a few dancers who are looking to get their mind out of their body and actually bring awareness into their body. So that can be almost like a kind of stripping away practice that dancers are sometimes looking for with us. They just want to marinate in presence. They just want to marinate in their awareness and see what emerges from that.
I find myself a bit lost to know what to ask you guys, because the work's very broad that you do. I mean, is there anything you're particularly interested in? I think maybe it's a good enough way in.
I feel like the experiential anatomy is a strong piece in the work, and our Monday morning class here in Bristol has a lot of experiential anatomy, and it's like it's a rolling piece, and we're always exploring another aspect of the body, bringing another piece of awareness into the body, finding new ways of moving. And I feel for me that's got a lot of meat on the bone. I'm always following a new exploration through the anatomy.
Mm. Yeah, and in contrast to that, I think Jamus and I both have slightly different. We come to the same place in the offering, and our work is ultimately bringing expression through and landing in the body. Jamus, what he's just said, is very much interested in the connections within the body, how the body's put together, and for me, the connections are about relationship with, like, the intimacy of how I feel within these with these connections in my body, and how I feel connected with another person. So when I'm moving with someone, by exploring the experiential anatomy, unraveling and meeting places that are inside me, how do I feel touched by the environment around me?
It's funny you say it's broad. It in some ways it is broad. In some ways it's very specific at the same time. And generally our work involves dancing, moving, touching, and then bringing awareness into the body. And so in some ways it's actually quite a tight frame, but actually it can go anywhere. And what wakes up, wakes up. We don't necessarily define what wakes up. And sometimes things quite left field can come into your movement. Like you think you're working with something, and then some sort of memory comes up and you realize, oh, right, okay, I'm bringing a piece of myself back in.
Yeah, and I guess from that perspective, there's something about including and allowing, because you can't, as James has just said, you can't determine what's going to come in. And so the invitation and the container that we're creating is one that is welcoming to, we're not welcoming someone to be violent, and yet we're welcoming a sense that they can feel the violence maybe within them, or feel the emotion or the joy or the leftness or the lostness. But all of this is contained within their own skin. So our invitation is to continually explore the connections through the experiential anatomy, through the developmental movement. And that is what creates the container for all of these textures, emotions, feelings, and qualities to arise and be felt.
There's one piece that we haven't brought, which is giving time to digestion. We feel like that's a very important part of our work, in that we can have all these experiences, but do we really take it in, and do we really let it through us? And so in classes, in retreats, we give a lot of time to taking the work in, allowing your body to find its way with the material. And often times where we're not teaching at all, maybe there's music on, or maybe people are just out on the land or walking, and they're given time to let the process move through them. And we talk to students a lot about that actually time's great to let things kind of marinate in you.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier the body moves a lot slower than the mind. So we can think a process through quite quickly, or relatively quickly, in comparison to what the length of time the body takes to digest it. And that's a really important aspect of what we offer.
And even aspects of the body have almost their different speeds. So like, often talk about organ time. which is tight. Organs like to go slow. They have this slow rhythm, and obviously different organs have different speeds. But yeah, we work a lot with that and saying, yeah. And we notice when a room drops into a different timing and pace.
So I was curious to ask about you talk about spiritual inquiry right at the beginning as an aspect of what you do. That's perhaps the sort of body of work you're drawing from that I'm least familiar with.
Well, what to say about that? I mean, the overall title, I guess, would be Embodied Consciousness. So a lot of spiritual inquiry is an inquiry of consciousness, but not landed in the body.
And that inquiry invites an interest into what's actually happening, an equal appreciation for good experiences as well as less pleasant experiences. Allowing curiosity to really emerge and letting a sense of I'm getting somewhere or I want that thing go a little bit. So there's a real sense of exploring life from the inside out.
Yeah, we're less interested in peak experiences or inviting peak experiences. If they happen, that's brilliant. Well, you enjoy it, and also equally allow it to pass through and allow. So it's an allowing of the waves of experience to happen. The possibility to experience something, also let it go.
I think it's worth saying that our work's a kind of slow cook.
Slow burn.
We're interested in lots of small shifts and changes that stick over time, rather than great big openings that can often rub back and close again. I think our teacher around that has been Feldenkrais.
Feldenkrais is beautiful, isn't it? I'm starting Feldenkrais training tomorrow.
Beautiful.
The sort of slowing down. And, I had this sense of, I'm not going to name names, there's another workshop going on while I was in yours. And then there was going on nearby. And the teacher had quite rudely, I think, turned her PA right up. So it was pretty intrusive on yours. And it was in the workshop with you guys, and it was like a slow, gentle, considered inquiry. It felt really like, I was with someone that wasn't sort of super into this stuff, and they seemed like they felt okay to do it. And there was a gentleness and a heart and a connection. And it felt like work that could really integrate because of this idea of digestion and time, And it wasn't dramatic in some ways. It wasn't jumping up and down. And all I could hear from the other tent was like, you're amazing. The world needs you. And there was screaming and shouting, and extreme sexual polarity was being used and various other things. State pumping,
Yeah.
And on the one hand, it was sometimes symbolic to me. I'm still trying to process it, because it was like this one set of work in our field, which can be like that. And it can literally drown out the quieter work. It can be more appealing to people. It has a sexy rock and roll quality. And then there's the work that's the sort of quieter, as you say, slow cook or slow burn, that takes into account digestion. Maybe people are getting less burnt out from it.
Yeah.
And it was a real moment of sort of almost these two tents with two different approaches. And I was really pissed off about it, It was like, "Rrr." And I guess I've sort of chosen a team there, as it were, I'm having done all the jumping up and down and all the fucking workshops and all the screaming and shouting at each other. It just seemed at best indulgent, at worst dangerous and narcissistic. And to have that coming through the tent where we were doing this quite gentle work that just felt very intelligent and kind was such a contrast.
Yeah. There's a lot of that contrast in the world.
It's interesting holding that as a teacher as well, when you're facilitating
for you, yeah.
And you've got this impact coming in through the walls.
Yeah.
And it's having it is affecting people. And yet people are staying with the inquiry, and a lot of appreciation for people to stay and not be drawn by the big loud voice.
And it really, literally in this case, I think it wasn't just that I was pissed off in the instance. Everyone's got a right to do what they were doing. It might have been a bit more considerate about the volume, but other than that, it was symbolic to me. You know, like it's almost symbolic of the sort of pressures we find ourselves in the marketplace around this stuff.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think there is something in that, though. You just said about, you've been out there and done all the jumping around and then you've come to where you are now. And I think in some senses, maybe people need to do the jumping about to actually understand where they need to go, where they need to be.
And I think that's perfect kind of statement of where some of our students come from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's they get to the point where they've done the jumping and shouting and they've done the expressing and catharting.
And then they realise there's something else.
And they need some nourishment.
Yeah.
You know, there's places that haven't opened through all of that.
Yeah, they're really looking to meet themselves in the more embodied way. Yeah.
All right, well, I feel I've asked about most things. Jamus, I haven't asked about your sight impairment. That it's not kind of, for want of a better word, the main way I see you, but it's you know, it's there, and I think it's interesting potentially to some listeners who maybe come from that background, have students, you know, with sight impairment. Is there anything you want to say about that? I'm just aware that's an opportunity really here for this episode.
I feel like the somatic work has been really helpful for me in coming away from bracing. Because when you can't see so well, there's a tendency to brace against life.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're always looking for something to bang into. And I feel like the somatic work really softens all of that. And then you can start to listen through more of your body. There's that amazing book. What's it called? The French book.
Oh, yeah.
There's a book about a blind man in the French resistance.
And there was light.
Yeah, and there was light. And it's an amazing book about how open the senses you can see through more of you. And I feel like the somatic practice has been learning how to see through more of me, particularly through touch and particularly through feeling space.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of finding out more, where can people find you online?
Our website is www.embodiedpresence.co.uk. We're also on Facebook at the moment. We have a Facebook page, Embodied Presence Dance Practice. They're the two main places at the moment online. All our details are on there. All workshops and retreats are on there. Ways to telephone numbers, etc. If you wanted to have a chat with us and ask us more questions.
Okay, great. And any closing message about the body?
Love it.
Simple as that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, love your body. Make friends with it.
As simple as that, huh? All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mark, for having us.
Thank you.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, is our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook. There, bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.